it's all I know. I don't want the finer things, I just wanna sit and sing. And when I wake I'm gonna dream. I hope life hasn't brought you down. You were right, what I do comes back around. Most of all, I pray your hearts find their way to fly. 'Cause we could be kids, staying young until we die. Yeah. Oh.
Telling her to calm down, my head in my hands now. Play it back, I still can't seem to figure out. When the rain came and we became a mosaic here on the ground. Baby, I can't seem to trace it. We went from weightless to dragging our feet on the floor. Lost in translation, I keep on chasing who we were before. Tell me it's alright, tell me we're alright. Tell me that you and I have a chance. Oh, tell me it's alright, tell me we're alright. Swear I traded all to get us back again. Don't know how to talk to you the way that I used to do. Nothing but negative space in our living room. Try to shrug it off, say it's nothing, but we both know that just isn't true. Baby, I can't seem to trace it. This love was sacred, now it's got our knees on the floor. Lost in translation, if we're way past saving, then what's it all for? Tell me it's alright, tell me we're alright. Tell me that you and I have a chance. Oh, tell me it's alright, tell me we're alright. Swear I traded all to get us back again. Back again. Oh, yeah. Back again. Telling her to calm down, my head in my hands now.
Silhouettes of family trees, one for you and one for me. 'Cause boy, it's already in your plans. Well, he was raised on daddy's hands. Shadows on the wall, what makes a man? Confusions, illusions out the door. But don't you tell me that you love me and then fill my mouth with words. It's just another lesson learned. 'Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. 'Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. nothing that I can't do. Hey, that girl, she laughs so loud and speaks in tongues, it turns me around. But you don't see the things that I see. You see, I dared to look, I couldn't find through tinted glass that aging mind. All the burn and the rust in the depths of my youth. Don't you tell me that you love me and then fill my mouth with words. It's just another lesson learned. 'Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. 'Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. There ain't nothing that I can't do. Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. Cause I'm falling, 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 falling down for you. There ain't nothing that I can't do.
Why is it that only with you things always go wrong? When yesterday you said it's me you looked for so long. We stayed up all night long, writing an awful song. Don't understand why can't we just get along? I said I saw the sunrise, you corrected the moon died, leaving me to cry. I don't know why. One day you're my guiding star, next day I don't know who you are. But when you say I'm sorry, it's melting me down. We both said too much with no meanings at all. Angry at ourselves to leave each other a bit blind.
And welcome to today's EU Elections Digital Digest. My name is Kate Bolingaro, and I'm the Managing Editor for Europe at MLEX. And I'll be your moderator here today. A special thank you to Digital Europe for hosting us here in their beautiful offices. I'm going to hand it over to Lasse Hamilton-Heidemann, who's going to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I just want to say welcome here to our offices at Digital Europe. It's great to see so many members and other good people gathered here, and I'm looking forward to a good debate for those here in the room, and welcome also to all those who are following online.
Thank you, Lasse. So it's a pleasure to be here today to discuss the future of the European tech landscape. The European elections may be over, but the real work is just beginning on how the EU's next chapter of digital policy will take place. So how will this newly elected European Parliament navigate the intricate web of technological advancements and challenges? What steps must be taken to harness the immense potential of artificial intelligence, a field that promises to revolutionize every aspect of our lives? And perhaps most crucially, will the EU unleash its reservoir of talent and innovation to emerge as a true digital powerhouse on the global stage? These questions are critical to determine Europe's tech trajectory, its global competitiveness, and whether it will rise as the pace setter for digital regulation and transformation. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of how this event is structured. I'm going to provide a short glimpse of the election results, highlighting some surprising outcomes and trends and the key players to keep an eye out for. Then we're going to move on to a panel discussion, and we'll open the floor to questions from the audience and online. So throughout the discussions, I would just encourage you to engage actively with the conversation. Don't be shy, share your insights, and you can join in on social media using the hashtag EU Digital Digest, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. So as you can see here, this is a graph from the European Parliament where it indicates the different seats that each party took in the European elections. So one of the biggest winner was the European People's Party, without a doubt. They secured 26% of the total seats with 189 seats out of 720. And despite facing challenges from the far right and the extreme right, they managed to increase their size, eating seats certainly from voters that are in the center-left parties. This almost certainly puts Ursula von der Leyen, the current European Commission president, in a good position to get that second mandate for another 5 years. For the Socialists and Democrats, they managed to actually basically maintain their space. They have 19% of the total seats with 135 seats. There was quite a bit of forecasting saying that the Socialists, this was the end of them. They were going to disappear. You know, there's been a lot of losses on the national level of the Socialist parties. However, that didn't come to pass. They've managed to stay about the same level as they were previously. Where we did see a drop, however, though, is with Renew Europe. You know, they obtained only 11% of the total. They had a bit of an implosion in several of the key countries, including in France. They struggled to get as many as they had previously before. And then, of course, like Ciudadanos in Spain, which is basically completely gone from the European political landscape and even the Spanish political landscape. Of course, there was also a forecasting of this surge of the far right. We've been talking about this in Europe for decades now. In these elections, we did see growth of far right, extreme right parties. So the European Conservatives and Reformists emerged as a very clear winner. You know, they secured 10% of the seats with 73 seats. Obviously, that puts them in pole position to serve as another dancing partner for the EPP when it comes to critical votes in the European Parliament and a lot of the committees. That's definitely something to be keeping an eye out for, because they will serve as a counterbalance to if there is a difference in opinion, if a grand coalition like we've had the last 5 years does indeed come back, which is what it's looking like. Of course, there's also Identity and Democracy, which despite the departure of the Alternative for Germany, still secured 8% of the seats with 58%. And the new national part, there's other parts that are non-aligned parties that are expected to perhaps join them. We're not exactly sure, for example, where Fidesz is going to land. That's a big question. So that's still to be determined. So we will see some seats growing in certain other configurations just based off of those non-aligned members. What was really interesting was the Greens that took quite the hit. They captured only 7% of the total of the seats. And the left also did face some losses. So there's been quite a loss on the left, which is obviously going to have a big impact in policy in general, but especially more on the climate front. That's going to perhaps shift the balance. But overall, we see the European Parliament, there has been a shift to the right. The balance of power is more with the EPP now because they are able to play along those configurations, whether they decide to work with the far and extreme right or they decide to go further with the coalition. Again, it all depends on the issue and the votes that they're trying to rally to get a certain policy through. And definitely, we also saw the election impacts on the national level. Everyone was, completely shocked when Emmanuel Macron from France called a snap legislative election, so that we could feel already the impact right away on the national stage. Obviously, the legislative elections could end up having a big impact in France on a whole bunch of different levels. Whether we see more protectionism or pushing for European champions, preference, for example, in cloud technology for using European operators. There will be some tech implications there. We also, with Germany, one of the big things for the socialists was, Olaf Scholz, the current chancellor, his party did the worst that it had done since it's been founded over 100 years ago in the national election level. So that was quite a bit of I think, a wake-up call in Germany for the ruling coalition as to what their policy agendas are and whether, folks are satisfied with that or not. Of course, there was also in Hungary, Viktor Orban's party did suffer significant losses, and it's its worst ever performance in the European Parliament elections. It still remains to be seen which group they're going to sit with. So that's going to be really interesting as well. And of course, Giorgia Meloni, one of the big winners of the night. Everyone was courting Giorgia Meloni from Marine Le Pen to Ursula von der Leyen in the run-up to the elections. So she's going to continue to serve as that bridge between the right wing and the extreme right, and there's a lot of credibility given to her for having run as a leader, as the head of the list. So she is a player in Brussels, and somebody definitely to keep an eye on as to what kind of an agenda she's going to be pushing. And then the thing is that while we are here in Brussels and we talk about the impact on the parliament, it also definitely has an impact on policy making, right? So whoever's sitting in the Berlaymont are the ones that are making the decisions about the direction that digital policy is going to be going in, tech policy, regulation, everything. So one of the key things for me looking at was the shift to the right, this balance of power that, we had a stronger left-wing voice in this current configuration of the coalition. Now the EPP is in a stronger position at this point. So they're going to be able to drive that policy agenda. And, this is going to be really interesting when it comes to issues like security versus privacy. If you're looking at, for example, when you're looking at law enforcement questions about, high-risk AI and other types of surveillance versus, the right to privacy, and, that's going to be a big question, because they may be able to work with the ECR and ID to rally votes that could, strengthen legislation in a certain way that fits their policy agenda versus what perhaps the coalition, if they were working together, would have put forward. So I think also one thing that we've been looking at MLEX is that our reporters have been doing a lot of work about what the next 5 years are going to mean. And for us, one of the key things we've come across is that we think the focus is going to move on implementation, especially in the digital space. We've seen a whole bunch of digital legislation coming through in the last 5 years. Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act, AI Act, all the acts you can think about, they've come through. So now the question is going to move to how are we going to implement these rules, and how are we going to work with member states to be able to implement that to ensure that there's a level playing field across the board and not 27 different interpretations of the law. So that's going to be something that we think is going to be a focus, is on the implementation, and a lot of the political fights are going to be over how do we interpret these laws? What does this mean for certain companies, certain sectors? And of course, artificial intelligence. This is beyond the doubt going to be one of the keywords of one of the buzzwords of the next mandate. Everyone is trying to regulate this space. Right now it's uncharted territory for a lot of. We don't really know what the end of impacts will be when it comes to artificial intelligence, but it's definitely going to be. We're in a big seismic moment in our lives as to how that impact is going to be. And there's also about sovereignty, EU sovereignty, and protectionism, and this whole idea of especially looking at what's going to happen in the U.S. elections. There's going to be a lot of eyes on Washington to find out if the U.S. becomes more protectionist, because obviously a right-wing shift does give a bit of a boost in terms of certain narratives surrounding local champions and focusing on Europe first, in the similar way that we would see if, for example, Donald Trump was reelected to the White House. So I think now we're going to move on to the panel. I won't keep you away from our speakers. So we're going to dive a bit deeper into the EU's election impact on the digital regulation. And I'd like to introduce two familiar faces, Lasse Hamilton-Heidemann, who's the Senior Director of Outreach at Digital Europe, and Andrea Renda, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the Center for European Policy Studies and who's the head of their Digital Economy Unit. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'm going to kick it off with a question to Andrea. With the election comes an opportunity for a reshuffle during the recomposition of political groups over the coming weeks. Do you anticipate any major changes to the current political groups, any mergers, any new groups coming up, and what potential political alliances can we expect?
Thank you, Kate, and thanks for having me. And it's a pleasure to have the possibility to debrief a little bit, right, as after this intense weekend. First thing I want to say that we haven't highlighted is that we probably expected a little bit higher turnout in these elections. There were, signals that there would be more interest in voting, regardless of whether the vote has the European Union in mind or the national politics. And this didn't happen. Basically, it had been 50.66 or 7%. 5 years ago, it's 51% this time. So it's basically the same with lots of differences throughout Europe. Second, as you correctly said, rather than the surge of the far right, we have one clear winner in these elections, and it's the EPP. There is no coalition possible without the EPP. But I would question, as an open reflection, whether this means that the EPP is actually stronger. Because we know that when you do the math in politics, it's a little bit complicated, right? And apart from the vote of the council, the future president or the designated president of the European Commission will need to secure the vote of the council, but also, in particular, the 361 votes in the parliament. And so here comes the group issue. As if you look at it from a rational perspective, and I'm not claiming here that Brussels is any rational, so we'll see what happens. But if you try to speculate about what's going on in the future, there is basically only one way that is possible. The first thing that is possible is Ursula von der Leyen is going to get the mandates to try and reach the political support needed to then become president of the European Commission. I don't see any alternative at the moment. Second, Ursula von der Leyen has no real alternative to trying to form a coalition with the Socialists and Democrats, Renew, and with either the external support or the integration of the Greens in their coalition. Why is that the case? Because she doesn't really have to get only to 361. She has to go much higher than that, because the so-called attrition rate, the people that in a secret vote, because in the parliament the vote is secret, might vote against her. Remember, 18% voted against her in the EPP convention in Bucharest. So you have to imagine that 50, 60 votes at least will get lost there. So she needs to get into the European Parliament after having secured a majority in the Council, but also with at least 420, 430 votes that are in theory certain, so that 361 are the ones that she actually gets. Remember, 5 years ago, she got a 9-vote majority, scraping votes a little bit here and there, 5-star movement, even Law and Justice, if I remember correctly. So that's a little bit what's, I think, the only thing that can happen. Why it's the only thing? Because the idea of Meloni as being the queen maker, probably, rather than the king maker, because of Ursula, I don't think holds that much after the elections, because, yes, Fratelli Italia will have 23 seats, ECR, pretty high number of seats. But the more you try and add seats to the right, the more most likely you lose seats to the left. So I don't think this is any possible at this stage, unless some surprise happens. A couple of other things, and I get to the potential things that might happen in the groups. The so-called surge of the far right is not a surge of the far right, but it's a steady increase, 2% increase, but this has gone on for a long time, right? And certainly there will be a bigger weight of the far right, but not in the coalition that will then call the shots and certainly endorse potentially Ursula von der Leyen in the vote. What will this mean? There is always the possibility for the future president of the European Commission to go for variable geometries, like in this past 5 years. So to have some votes backed by the right-hand side and others more with the basic coalition. But if I'm one of the Greens or one of the Socialists and Democrats, and I'm approached by the ever stronger EPP to form a grosse coalition agreement, this time I probably pretend a bit more of a commitment. I don't want to see stuff like the nature restoration law or other Green Deal provisions being voted against with different majorities. So I would expect a much more detailed agreement there. So this is a little bit the dynamics. Happy to take questions on this going forward. Now, on the groups, I don't think ECR and ID will merge. They are completely divided on many things, starting with Putin, of course, starting the approach towards Russia. AFD might find a home, perhaps at some point back into ID. Maybe it just takes maybe correcting a couple of interesting statements lately, maybe on the SS and other things. But I think what Le Pen achieved by expelling AFD, this is what she wanted. She's achieved this with this election. I think she can probably bring him back in. And so I don't see the huge right-wing coalition. There might there is still, I think, quite a lot of unattached seats. Some of them are parties that are one MEP and so on, but others might be significant. Of course, Fidesz is one of the most important. There might be some reorganization, but I don't see huge surprises in that respect. To the left, there is also something interesting. The result of Sarah Wagenknecht in Germany is interesting. She gets, I think, 6 seats. 6 seats are important in European Parliament if you think that the smallest member states of the European Parliament actually count for 6 seats. So Sarah Wagenknecht actually counts like Cyprus or Malta in the European Parliament. So you have to do the math in a way that at least gets you to a credible path. And what does this mean for the program? I'm happy to elaborate further, and then when you tell me to stop, I stop. Okay, but then we can continue later. What's gonna for the program of the Commission? This does not necessarily mean a complete shift to the right, exactly because of the strong bargaining position of this party that there are between the EPP and the majority, right? Think about Germany. Germany has this small party that most people hate, like the Freie Demokratische Partei, that today probably wouldn't even get to 5%, but they are in the traffic light coalition, absolutely instrumental to get in the majority. So they have been able to leverage a lot of power lately. And this is basically not entirely, because there's also the council that has a lot of more conservative representation, but there is a balancing act to make there. So I would expect the Green Deal to continue, and I explain in a second also why and how. I would expect the social stances to be firmly claimed by the Socialists and Democrats, in particular minimum wage, some of the territorial dimensions of the Green Deal, the twin transition probably becoming triple transition with the social dimension. I would expect Renew probably to reach agreement with EPP on the side of defense. Remember Sandro Gozzi as lead candidate talking even about a 100 billion euro fund for defense. EPP certainly converges on this, so we will see a strong emphasis on defense. Now, why is Ursula most likely the best candidate at the moment? You hinted at this, Kate. And why is the Green Deal unlikely to see a U-turn? As you say, no, if the real estate agents, whenever they want to convince a customer, they say location, 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 right? And here in the Commission, we have heard for months already, implementation, implementation, implementation. Ursula von der Leyen has been stressing one thing that she actually cleverly did, and sometimes even unintentionally did, because the pandemic slowed down a lot of the work of the Commission in the first years, is the fact that she left most things halfway at the end of her first mandate. There is a huge pipeline of projects in the Green Deal industrial plan. There is a lot of implementation to be done in the digital policies. There are just new files that will emerge, perhaps the Digital Networks Act. I know that you're not really looking forward to it, but the Digital Networks Act, there is certainly first thing on the table of the new parliament, the review of GDPR. These things we will see, so new legislation, but the rest is about implementation, reduction of regulatory costs and burdens throughout the territory, emphasis on competitiveness. We'll see the report by Mario Draghi. These things will be a clear focus, but not dismissing the Green Deal. But the Green Deal will have to do something that, in my opinion, and I wrote a couple of articles lately on this, it should have done, and I close here, unless you continue, it should have done from the very beginning. The Green Deal embraced a sort of a sustainable development logic by taking out some parts of the Sustainable Development Goals, if you wish, the social dimension, the infrastructure and growth dimension, the strength of institutions dimensions, rule of law, and so on. It did something to the Sustainable Development Goals that normally you shouldn't do to the Sustainable Development Goals, right? They are presented typically as integrated and indivisible. We see to some extent the consequences today. The Green Deal has insufficiently taken into account the social dimension, the territorial dimension, and the competitiveness dimension. So we will revisit probably in the coming months the Green Deal in a different salsa, and this salsa is half conservative, half S&D, and the say 1/4 S&D and one quarter green or renew. We'll see what the final cocktail looks like, but I don't see major changes. If not this course correction in the agenda of the Commission going forward.
Thanks, Andrea. Lasse, now since you're talking about the Commission, what about the mandate of the outgoing Commission? What lasting impact has it had on Europe's digital landscape? And can you highlight some of the key successes and some of the areas where it fell short?
Yes, certainly. The one thing that was obviously a positive was the focus on the twin transition, and the green transition happened. Let's see how much of a backslide we will see afterwards. I agree with you, probably not much. But the digital became a bit the forgotten twin. It wasn't actually had the same focus as the other part of the twin transition. So we are obviously, and for obvious reasons, keen to reinvigorate that and make sure that that comes back on the agenda fully. Then digital came back as an enabler because of all these new technologies and all the things that we could now do, because we got COVID and we all needed a passport to make sure that we could travel across borders and so on. This came to the fore, and it came in a more positive light, at least for a while. The EU member states seems to have come back to love the single market a little bit. It has been struggling and it's been hard, and we have fought for many, many years now, but hopefully now the impetus is there, since the burning platform of competitiveness really makes it necessary. So we hope that things will come back that way. Then there's the obvious ones because of the geopolitics. Cyber defense has come back in a big way. And the whole discussion about industrial policy is obviously there. It's going to continue into the next mandate as well. So we think that it has gone reasonably well on the digital things for the positive things that I mentioned now. There are other things as well, of course. The first and most obvious one, the tsunami of regulation that has hit the digital sector. We counted 60 plus pieces of legislation, whilst by themselves, probably reasonable mostly. It just creates a cumulative burden that really drags our competitiveness. We need to find a way to deal with that. And promising 25% on easing of reporting burdens in certain areas is nice, but we need to also see it. As I recall, it's not the first time these things have been promised. Promised one in, one out 5 years ago, and nothing happened. So let's see how far we can actually get with that. We will obviously be pushing for that, because it is important, because it really hampers our competitiveness. Then there's the whole coming back to the industrial policy. I mean, one man's resilience is the other man's protectionism, and we keep on turning around these things. And I think it's extremely important that we put down some goalposts about what it is that we need to protect, what we have to do ourselves, what we can do with others, so we can create a reasonably balanced system that doesn't isolate us from the world. We need others. We are not an island upon ourselves. Even though it sometimes sounds like that when these things are being discussed. And then on the also slightly negative side, there's been a lot of focus on the size of the tech giants and what they were doing, why they were doing it, and when they were doing it, and how dangerous it was, and so on, instead of trying to look at the things that these technological developments can also do for us. It creates enormous potential for us. There's a giant potential in artificial intelligence, automations of all sorts of things. Even the green agenda could be greatly furthered from making sure that we use energy in the right way, and artificial intelligence is an obvious way of doing that. So there's a lot of things there that that could be better, and we hope it will be.
Thank you. And Andrea, How do you expect the new shape of the next 5 years to shape Europe's digital agenda?
The digital agenda, again, the implementation is going to be very important. Many of the files that we've seen, Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, certainly, but also Data Governance Act and Data Act, very important, let alone the AI Act, is going to be very difficult to implement going forward. And the Cyber Resilience Act all have overlaps. That's one part of the digital agenda where we need an effort of sort of codification effort, right? Because each, and I've been advising the Commission on many of this, so I've seen how siloed was the preparation of these acts. Even people within the same DG that were working on different files didn't talk to each other, also because mostly they were working from home, right? It was during the pandemic. And each piece of legislation has a different enforcement mechanism, a different configuration of a body or a network of experts or an office and so on and so forth. Some of the provisions, there are bridges between some of the provisions, but there is an enormous amount of overlaps between these provisions and potential inconsistencies. So the key issue is there are many companies, let alone of course, the gatekeepers for the DMA that are simply a small number, but many companies will find themselves in a situation in which they will have to decide, when I do this, am I complying with what? So with everything, or am I actually non-complying? Am I violating another rule if I comply with one? And so on. There's going to be lots of uncertainty that we are not fully equipped at the moment to clarify. I don't think even the role of the intermediaries that are on a territory should guide companies in complying with legislation such as the digital innovation hubs and others, or the interpretive guidance that will be given by Commission or other bodies will need to be strengthened a lot. But I think we need to have a big exercise in understanding how to reconcile the different provisions. There is standardization going on, right? CENELEC is working on the standards for conformity assessments on the AI Act. There's standardization going on for the CRA, right? The Cyber Resilience Act. And on the Data Act, there's a lot of standardization going on. If these processes are also done in parallel with no integration, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. Whereas the standardization work could actually create that glue where even the small and medium-sized enterprises have a reference and understanding what does it mean to comply, and also are fairly sure that if they abide by the standard, they're actually complying. So that's one body of legislation that I see will see the implementation and hopefully also the streamlining as a core focus. There's another element which I've highlighted also in a recent editorial that came out a few days ago that I think is key for Europe, which is what we call the digital public infrastructure, which doesn't mean going against the tech giants. It means creating the layers of digital identity, digital wallets, data governance, where public and private sector can actually interoperate to create an environment where each citizen has a self-sovereign wallet, so it has control of where the data go, and can pick and choose between public, private offers, large companies, small companies, more local, more pan-European, in an environment that is not a federation or interoperable national environment, but actually a common European space. This is what the recently entered into force European Union wallet, digital wallet, and also to some extent what the data spaces and the data space for the public administration and the Interoperable Europe Act should try to realize going forward. It is absolutely non-trivial. We like the difficult stuff, right, in Europe. So this is super complicated, but it is also sort of a moonshot in that respect. And talking about moonshots, I quickly say 2 or 3 other things that, in my opinion, could happen over the coming months. So first of all, the potential launch of a large-scale initiative on AI is something that is gaining traction inside DG Research, DG Connect, and a little bit DG Grow. Everybody has a different idea, so I'm actually actively involved in trying to put all of them together. But there is appetite for trying to create, without cannibalizing, let's say, or crowding out private funding, but to create the glue that Europe needs in order to invest in a European approach to trustworthy artificial intelligence that, again, is not against anyone, but incorporates elements of machine learning and, in the medium term, even some additional elements of reasoning that are absolutely essential at the moment to move from the current GPTs to systems that don't hallucinate, that are more trustworthy. So that is a clear direction for Europe, with at least 3 domains in which Europe could actually try to secure a little bit of competitiveness. The one is in science applications. The scientific advice mechanism of the European Commission, DG Research, has advocated for the creation of a CERN for AI in science recently. The contours are still unknown, but this is shaping up. Robotics in industry, where Europe has the existential challenges of having to safeguard its leadership in many industry sectors, and it has to do it with a trustworthy approach to robotics and the integration in human-machine decision-making. And again, the digital public infrastructure, where we need AI to integrate public services and the operations of public administration in a way that is inevitably trustworthy. And so we need to go through breakthroughs in many respects there, to create a European approach to democracy that incorporates then a vibrant environment in which American, European, Chinese, African, Latin American companies can compete with the European ones, and the public administrations have control of what happens. I see this as important. A little plea, and what I will be fighting for as a researcher over the coming years, is also the definition of an idea of twin transition that is more integrated than what we've been using until now. It doesn't just take earmarking 1% for digital and 1 for green and pretending that they talk to each other. We have never gone through a full reflection as to which approaches to digital technologies are actually functional to the green transition, and which plans for industrial transformation that incorporates a digital and a green dimension actually create good jobs. So this is, I think, where we will end up. You look at the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, the good jobs dimension is also very important. Look at the S&D potential stances in a potential future Grand Coalition agreement backing von der Leyen. The good jobs dimension and the minimum wage will probably be, in my opinion, the most salient. So I think that the digital agenda could go in that direction, but the end of easy choices, is clear. I mean, we don't just go green or green and digital. We actually have to recognize that reality is more complicated and trade-offs are abundant.
Lasse, I see you shaking your head in agreement. Do you want to give us a little bit more of your insights, and maybe you can then touch upon the biggest challenges that are facing the digital economy over the next mandate?
Yes, surely, and I'm somewhat uplifted to hear your suggestion for what might happen in digital policy. It seems very positive. I mean, we are very much going for 3-4 points. I will quickly lay them out. So it's simplify, measure, and implement. So this is the issue that you went for before. We need implementation. We need to not continue to make so much new regulation, but to make sure that the regulation we have actually functions and is implemented and enforced everywhere. Because that creates the level playing field. It prevents fragmentation of the internal market. It's better and more fair for everyone. So we want that, and we want it to happen. At the same time, the simplification is obviously needed. As you pointed out, there are overlaps in much of this legislation, so we definitely need there to be a more integrated view of how this can be implemented. The Commission needs to be on point in terms of making sure that the member states don't run off in 27 different directions and legislate left, right, and center and gold plate a bit here and so on. So we don't create that internal market that prevents us from actually getting the champions that we want. So single market is awesome. I could give you a long speech on it. I think you probably heard it, but it is incredibly important. It is our main source of competitiveness. Without the internal market, we have nothing we can be competitive on. So this has to function, and we have to do more. And we're hoping the burning platform of competitiveness now will light the fire under the politicians, so they actually take the single market seriously for the first time in the last 25 years. So thus enthused, moving on to acting as one team, the public-private partnerships is going to be absolutely necessary. You covered it as well, the integration in the public sector of digital solutions, working together between private companies and the public to make sure that we get the best things out. It's absolutely necessary. The public can't do it alone. They need to work with all that power that is in the public procurement system, and but the public cannot do it alone. I mean, we see it falls almost every time some member state or some government or something tries to do their own digital solution. It never really works. Just get the guys who are actually good at it to do it. So this is also very important, and especially in cybersecurity and other areas where the skills are very few and it's very hard to hire people in. You absolutely need to work with the private sector, otherwise you will get nowhere. In terms of the funding, we are asking for 25% in digital for basically any layout of public funds from the EU. It's particularly relevant in defense for obvious reasons. You can have a tank, but if it breaks down because the cybersecurity doesn't work, then you're nowhere. You can see at the war in Ukraine how that has gone, not dominated by classic weapons, but by drones and technology. So that will also be extremely important. And of course, the whole enabling effects of the digitalization on green tech is going to be increasingly important, and much more so in the future than it has been. So having sort of drawn out a slightly negative pictures of all the things that are wrong and all the things that we want to fix, I just want to say also that we have a lot in Europe. We have very many things that we are very, very good at. If you look at the figures, it doesn't look so good, but we actually have the potential to make this happen. If we tweak things the right way, we absolutely have the potential to be global competitors and up our competitiveness in a way that we can compete with the rest of the world. And we should do so. But we need a bit of political courage to make it happen, because if we continue down the road that we're on now, it will not be sufficient.
Andrea, what implications will the election results have for the distribution of the EU's top jobs, specifically the top digital roles?
It's super difficult to say at this stage, right? On the top jobs, okay, we already spoke about von der Leyen, and we sense that Metsola might continue her mandate until then perhaps S&D will take over with the socialist president of the European Parliament. It's difficult to identify. Well, first of all, we need to know who the candidates are for the various commissioners. I would expect, but that's a pure speculation. Like, I mean, I was just like holding a crystal ball I don't have. So, and really walking on eggs here. I would expect potentially the next Commissioner for Growth in the Single Market and the Connect commissioners to be a little bit more cautious on the legislation and a little bit more wary of the need for innovation. This, I think, might reverberate also on the identity of the rapporteurs that will be chosen for the review of the GDPR, which is a key review because, of course, it is where everything started, and it is also where implementation was never satisfactory, right? And so that would be, I think, a very important test bed, and it will involve the European Commission as well. So, for example, the way in which the AI office will handle the regulation of general purpose AI systems, but also part of its mandate, which is promoting innovation in AI, will be essential. And so the personality of the commissioners will be very important. I would expect a pro-innovation commissioner there. Hopefully with parachute, in the sense, not someone who's a complete crazy person that say, okay, let's get rid of everything, or let's forget about enforcement. No, but someone who's wary of the need for well-written, well-timed, and adequately clear regulation. And so assistance also to the ones that need to comply for the benefits of everything that we've been putting in place, which is fairly revolutionary over the past 5 years in theory, not in practice, in theory. It's fairly revolutionary in the digital agenda that this can actually happen by shaving off the negative parts of it and taking what's interesting, which is the creation of an environment that is pluralistic, that is user-centric, and that is as open as possible, in the sense that Europe, I think, will bet over the next few years on, let's say, design or build rather than buy solutions in public administrations, and open source software as a primary choice. So that is something that takes a commission that has a very broad view of what digital means, not only in and of itself, but also how digital permeates society in various ways, and how existential tackling the epistemic risks that we have today, especially vis-a-vis artificial intelligence, will be in the coming years. We need to look inside these systems as much as possible, especially when they permeate the texture of our society in a way that potentially threatens our agency. And this is a problem that we don't have that much today, but we will certainly be talking about this in 3, 4, 5 years. And the final thing I want to say about digital, do you agree with me that this should be the last time that we vote for the EU in a way that is non-electronic? No, you disagree. Okay, I just want to, because I know that there's a lot of risk, right, in electronic. I mean, my wife is Venezuelan, and this is a country that has used electronic voting for a long time. So you imagine the level of trust I have. But because it's the easiest to manipulate and so on. But there's countries that have had. In my own country, in Italy, you see the distribution of votes and turnout rate, center and south. I mean, people just woke up and saw what the weather looked like and say, okay, if it rains, maybe I go and vote, right? And this is why we kept everybody awake, including yourself, at midnight in the European Parliament on Sunday, because Italy was the last one to close 11 p.m., right? The first exit polls. It is important to start thinking now about how we want to vote in 5 years. And the digital agenda, no matter who agrees or disagrees, in my opinion, in 5 years, we'll be voting, we might be voting electronically for the European Union. But okay, since there's a Q&A, now I'm curious. But of course, this depends on the existence of a trusted, secure European digital identity, the availability of non-digital solutions for those that want to rely on them, and so on and so forth. But let's think about it, because it takes at least 3-4 years to make it happen, and perhaps we wouldn't even make it if we started today. So just as a footnote.
So Lasse, final question for you. How could a new commission affect the enforcement implementation of policies?
I think there's going to be so much implementation, and then it's going to be so wide-ranging in so many things. So we hope that someone will take this very, very seriously as their job to make sure that this actually happens now. We've set all these things in place. The sort of pinnacle of frustration would be if they then couldn't actually then implement all these things. And we end up with the most conscientious companies bearing a lot of burdens, hiring lawyers instead of engineers and so on to make sure that they're absolutely compliant, and everyone else, it just doesn't happen in half the member states, or some will not do it. So when we have things in place, it obviously has to work. Otherwise, it's just distorted and it doesn't do anything. So we are hoping that the focus will be on more implementation. Of course, there's going to be a need at some stages to have a little bit of legislation here and there. But if we can actually make these things work now, that would be a great relief. And the simplification, again, make sure that there are no overlaps. We're not reporting things twice. We have one place to go to. These sort of what appears to be basic things, but in fact are not implemented in almost any member states. We have 27 contact points per member state to do just basic setting up of a small business. So these things, the sort of low-hanging, what appears to be low-hanging fruit, but it hasn't actually happened for a long, long time. We need to pick these up, because otherwise our competitiveness goes and it will not function.
Great. Now I'm going to turn to the audience. Questions? How about you go first?
Thank you very much. I'm Karen Mulcahy, member of the European Parliament for a couple of weeks more. I would love to hear which members of Parliament are leaving, which members of Parliament are coming in, and which ones are staying, which have been active on the digital sort of sphere, out of my sort of on a piece of paper. I mean, Axel Voss.
You know that better, right?
Well, Axel Voss is coming back.
Yeah, exactly. And he's ready to work on the review of GDPR. That's what he wants.
Exactly. Benefy is coming, but I mean, Dragic Stonoraci is not coming back. Intervelt is not there. Kolaja from the Czech Republic is not there. Patrick Breyer is not coming back. So this Charansova is not there. Eva Kaili is not coming back. But I mean, what is this going to mean for the digital legislation? Because as you mentioned, the rapporteurs is going to be important. And on the electronic vote, I mean, I don't think that the electronic or non-electronic version of voting is what makes the difference for the turnout. I think having it on a Sunday, at least for Denmark, where I'm from, is semi-catastrophic. And I also think a lot of the analytics on why the votes went as they did actually miss out on the fact, for example, in a country like Denmark, 30% participation in the vote less for the European elections than for the national ones, and that probably influences where people put their votes. I think it's really interesting what you said about public procurement and also sort of public digitalization. We made in the Uri Committee an own initiative report on digitalization and administrative law, where a lot of the things that you mentioned were brought forward. How can we make sure that this own initiative report, some of the ideas there actually gets implemented and perhaps used as a sort of good source for, good example for member states? Because a lot of the things that you called for from the panel were actually also something that we got the European Parliament to call for.
Who wants to go first? Lasse?
Yeah, I can go first. For the MEPs, you left out the two countrymen, Schaldemose and Løkkegaard. But other than that, yes, we have a list. We will not be publishing it, but it's there. And we're happy to see that some come back, some does not come back. They will be replaced with others that are hopefully interested in this. This is the same dynamic that basically goes for any parliamentary period. It's always nice to have some who actually knows the areas and can come back and deliver good things. But I'm sort of medium confident that this will also happen this time. We have some good people coming back, so not too worried on that. In terms of the integration in the public procurement, we expect, and I hope I'm not breaking any confidences, but that the public procurement directive will come back up, and that will be discussed again. And there will be a super important discussion around what should be in there. Because right now it's a framework and it refers to many other pieces of legislation, but maybe there's a political pressure for that to change and for the public procurement to be used in a much more forward way than it has been done so far. So more green, there'll probably be more digital, there'll be questions around the sort of geopolitics, industrial policy, champions, and so on. All these things will be pushed into that because the muscle is enormous. It's 14% of European GDP, and we're not really using it for anything right now because the only focus is on price. This is clearly counterproductive and need to be changed. So I think that might be one way to get more digitalization pushed in, even though it's public procurement, but I think there's a potential there that is a low-hanging fruit.
Andrea?
Well, I don't make lists of MEPs because I'm an academic. I don't care. Normally, when I see that someone has been appointed rapporteur, I start working with them. And this, 5 years, then we end up working quite a lot together. Also because I like to, offer free advice. I'm just for the spirit of trying to contribute, my 2 cents of knowledge to the work of the European Parliament, which has been, in many cases, extraordinary, in my opinion, in these past 5 years. For the level of learning that we've seen, I'm working a lot on the AI Act, seeing how Dragos, Brando, Axel, Eva Maidel, they just piled up a lot more awareness for an institution that only 7 years ago was calling for giving electronic personality to smart autonomous robots. That's quite a journey, okay? So I'm looking forward to working with the new ones, and I'm sure there will be a lot of competent people coming in. The public procurement, I do agree, but then you realize, sometimes you realize you've just gotten old. I've just gotten old doing my job. I worked on the reduction of administrative burdens by 25% as an advisor to the European Commission in 2005.
Yep.
Almost 20 years ago. Then the plan was launched in 2007, okay? But I was advising, I wrote a study for DG Enterprise, it was called at the time.
I remember.
With a young Gert-Jan Koopman, that at the time was in DG Enterprise, and we worked on the reduction of administrative burdens by 25%, which eventually was launched. In 2012, we realized that the claimed reduction of 33% didn't count the new legislation that had come in. So, you only count the minus but not the plus. So it was a little bit of a strange half-baked exercise eventually. And I worked on green public procurement in a study, I don't know how many years ago, like 2011, for the Commission, to realize how limited is the potential of the Commission to really push the strategic use, as it's called normally in the literature, strategic use of public procurement, so for innovation, for green transformation, and so on and so forth, into the member states. Now, if there's one thing that can be done to really increase the directionality that the European level can give to innovation is the leveraging of public procurement. We see this In the US, we've seen it not only Inflation Reduction Act, but also in AI. There's been there was an executive order that mandates that the federal agencies, when they procure AI that respects certain conditions. We should do the same with trustworthy AI in Europe, and so on and so forth. In the digitalization of procurement and the administration, I think the Parliament has done a remarkable job, and also the Commission has done a remarkable job. And a few weeks ago, when we had the annual conference at SEPS, it's called the Ideas Lab, I interviewed at the end Roberto Viola, and he told me something that I quoted in this editorial that I wrote a few days ago, which I liked very much, because it not only speaks to what the EU can do internally, but also what the EU could do, for example, within the global gateway for countries, transforming the relationship between the EU and other countries into a partnership, what we tried already to do in relabeling DevCo into INTPA, right? But these partnerships, we don't see them really happening among equals, and with the genuine spirit of creating values where our European solutions are being deployed. So what he said is, Europe might not have a lot to sell, but it has a lot to offer. And I think this is exactly what we should do with digital technologies. They are empowering. They should be used to empower local communities within Europe, the national and subnational communities within Europe. At the same time, they could be formidable as a stack of technologies that could be deployed in other parts of the world to enable other countries to develop their own solution, generate value and retain value where the value is been originally created, which is a little bit the problem that we've had, and that has created this tension also with the tech giants to some extent, because the digital revolution has become a gigantic machine that sucks value and polarizes this in the hands of the few, which is not necessarily something that we should be taking for granted, and because technology can also be more empowering and more decentralized. And I think the way we digitalize our administrations going forward, already in the words of the Parliament and in the words of the Commission in this mandate, has gone in that direction, the decentralization and the central coordination, as good as it gets for the single market, right?
Other questions? The gentleman right here.
Hi, my name is Bert Hack from BBVA. Single market, this is exactly the point where I want to ask for. Single market as driver for European competitiveness. But given the rise of the right, of the nationalists' parts, how do you think this might affect the moment that has been started with the letter report in several sectors that have not finished yet their single market? So how do you see this moment to continue?
I can start and then I'll pass it on. Yes, it is that could indeed be worrying. What we're hoping and arguing for is that this is too important. It's simply too important, and if we want to ensure in the long term, our economic security, if we need a strategy for how we can become competitive in the future, we need the single market. There is simply no way around it. And yes, the member states not always super keen, and nationalistic views are not easily combined with a further integration of the single market. So that will present a challenge. We're hoping the impetus for the competitiveness is strong enough to overcome those challenges. That's the idea. But yes, it will prevent some things perhaps from happening. We're hoping it won't happen, but we cannot be sure.
Yes, difficult. I think a big push for the single market will come also from the Draghi report. So, in the name of competitiveness. This doesn't mean that it will also happen in the name of competition, meaning what the letter report says about the transformation of national relevant product markets in telecommunications into pan-European ones, I think will probably hit a wall. That might make a little bit of a difference, right? But the fact that we should push for consolidating the single market on top of the infrastructure layer of the digital ecosystem, I think this is difficult to touch. Also, based on what we said before, right? That the math doesn't really put the far right into the driving seat here, but it puts rather than the EPP and with some constraints into the driving seat. So that is, and I think the problem with the single market, it's always, I mean, for people like me, it's always been a compelling argument, right, in terms of the single market. What has changed in the meanwhile is that the rest of the world is also changed. Now, the argument in favor of the single market is even more compelling today, right? And we're not talking about Bolsheviks. You know, we talk about Mario Draghi. You know, we're talking about fairly conservative but also very innovation-oriented experts that look at the geography and the economy of Europe. They look at how the weight of Europe is shrinking with respect to the rest of the world, and they realize that if we don't get our act together and reach some economies of scale and scope in our economy, by putting together what we call place-based innovation, but also pan-European value chains and pan-European projects, you know, we would never go anywhere, and we are cursed in the sense that we're destined to decay. So this might take a slightly different form compared to what we've seen in the past. And the form, which I think will be one of the things that will keep us busy over the coming years, is this idea of the potential continuation of Next Generation EU, the earmarking of own resources, not for protecting, you know, at national level, the economy and society from the pandemic. So many, you know, the recovery and resilience and recovery plans are largely looking at the national level. But here, the idea of common resources would be to identify those really important projects that are cross-border and they are strategic and key for the European economy, and they tick all the boxes, right? Good jobs, green, circular, and so on and so forth. And these projects, you know, and if we have the money, you know, can we earmark specific resources to create and consolidate the single market by leveraging a limited number of super important projects, and how much money this will cost, because the money that's being piled up in terms of requests is something we cannot afford, right? Sandro Gozzi talked about 100 billion for defense. Ukraine reconstruction is credited with 496 billion. Mario Draghi and Paolo Gentiloni in the past have been talking about 500 billion per year for the twin transition, or 650 billion per year for the twin transition in some cases. You know, it's true that in the case of defense, for example, this also comes with a lot of savings at the national level. It's true. That's what von der Leyen said at least 3 times lately. Spend better, spend less, spend European. But yeah, we don't have that money, right? So it's like a family that sits down and say, okay, we want a new car, we want a new kitchen, we want to also go on holiday to the Seychelles and everything. No, that just doesn't work, you know. So we're going to have to pick 1 or 2 of these things, and that's already a very luxurious family, the way you put it, right? So I think we're going to have that problem, and the specific tiny little differences in the composition, in the people and in the political balance that is emerging now might tilt the balance in favor of one over the other.
One final question, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Brandstatter from MLEX, a tech reporter there. You have mentioned green and tech, digital green tech several times. Can you elaborate a bit on that and what you think are going to be the crucial points here?
Yeah, so from my perspective, it's so firstly, there's the savings that can be gained by using technology. So we could use artificial intelligence to better control our energy system. There's enormous savings to be had there. There's smart metering. There's a number of different ways in which we can do that. And then there is also the whole sort of critical infrastructure. Energy is going to be critical infrastructure now. The whole green part of our economy that creates all our electricity and all our energy is going to be critical infrastructure. That is largely run digitally, one way or the other. Without the necessary cyber infrastructure to protect that, we are vulnerable, and that will not be acceptable in the sort of current political climate. So that will have to come in as well. So there's saving to be done. It's more green, and we need to keep it safe. So those are the 3, I think, pointers for that.
Yeah, let me I agree with Lasse, and let me fast forward a little bit. What's going to happen in the next 5 years, technology-wise, right? We are talking a lot about AI, and AI certainly is going to be part of the picture going forward. We will see an enormous rise in the number of connected devices in what we call the Internet of Things. The EU has this ambition of deploying edge layers, so sort of deepening the infrastructure. Sometimes I call it, when I want to, cut corners a little bit, a peripheral nervous system, if you wish, meaning so far we have the cloud, which is the brain. We actually deepen the infrastructure as close as possible to where the devices need to take action. And so actually try to process as locally as possible the data, and perhaps even smaller data, but closer to where action needs to take place. Think about the digital decade communication that has the target of deploying 10,000 edge nodes on the European territory, which are not enough in any case, but it's an idea of decentralizing the digital infrastructure. Now that, in and of itself, has enormous advantages in terms of consumption, and it's essentially a green choice, but we haven't discussed that fully. There's a lot of greening through technology that can happen in agriculture and all the agri-food chain, and that's absolutely essential because agriculture is a key component, and it's one of the areas where we wildly violate planetary boundaries. And so our digital technologies, if deployed properly, can really help there. The climate and energy-related dimensions are interesting. Recently, we crunched some numbers at CEPS with the help of my chief data scientist, Pierre-Alexandre Ballon. We looked at where is actually venture capital going in AI? And historically, like on AI, so this is all the data on venture capital going to startups. We see that defense, aviation are much higher. Energy is actually fairly low in the ranking. It's actually one of the last positions. It's close to coal, actually, which you wouldn't expect, which is the last of the sectors that we looked at, and happy to share the data. But the problem that we've had until now, and where I think we should be putting a lot more emphasis, and I hope we will, is that this legislation, and you hinted at this, has been focused a lot on the risks of AI. The opportunities of AI haven't been part of the picture in the same way, despite the fact that back in 2020, the European Commission has said, we want an ecosystem of excellence in AI and an ecosystem of trust. We've been building, until now, the ecosystem of trust, but we need to implement it, okay? The AI Act, the standardization mandate, and so on and so on and so forth. There's a bit missing, the liability part, which was presented, but late, so the Parliament could not, we'll see if they take it forward. I think it was presented in September 22 only by the Commission, so Parliament had very little time, and this was not discussed within this mandate, this legislature. On the ecosystem of excellence, we've seen very little. What do we have to do to make it happen? In my opinion, the first key is the data spaces. We need to make sure that we create data collaboratives that work and that are meant to pull together the data that we need to reuse this data and give an opportunity to AI to give us the solutions. Because without high quality and high quantity of data, no machine learning-based system can help, right? And so for climate, actually this goes beyond the EU. The EU actually should even sponsor global data collaboratives for climate, for agriculture, for pandemic preparedness, for global public goods, as we call them normally. Think about European public goods. We do need data spaces that work. So far, we've seen a couple of difficult experiments, the data space for health. We've seen, of course, a very difficult experiment of Gaia-X more generally. So I think this is an area where we need to put back our hands into the engine and see what is not working, because there are many things in there that need to be unpacked and put to the service of a society that is meaningfully powered by AI. So where AI is a means to an end. Only focusing on becoming more competitive in AI, it doesn't do the trick, because it doesn't treat the AI as a means. AI is a means to an end, and it should remain as such.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Lasse. And thank you, everyone who joined us in person and online. It was a very excellent panel. I'm going to hand it over to Lasse to just give a couple of closing comments.
Yes. So basically, thank you for being here and engaging in this interesting debate. I can say that there are now drinks for those present, and for those online, I'm very sorry, there are no drinks for you unless you make them yourselves. But with that, thank you very much and have a lovely rest of the evening.